were reading September ballots, the result taped from the tabulator would be correct. And I believe this is exactly what happened. To the extent that there was one location and one tabulator that was using a September memory card with October ballots, and it had this extra person or contest, that is, there wouldn't be any changes to the top of the ballot contests, but there very well may be a change to the affected race. And to my knowledge, that's precisely why the Secretary of State's office, together with Antrim County officials, are working to do a 100% audit on the presidential race to confirm that the results on the tape actually match 100% the results of the paper ballots, which of course had been securely stored under the custody of the local election officials.
So that is not my understanding of how that whole process worked, and it doesn't, the numbers that we saw should not have been affected at the top of the ticket for stuff that was going on at the bottom of the ticket. Now, what I had in my head for how that happened is you've just completely come back with something different than what I expected to hear. So can you explain to me how the top of the ticket numbers would have been affected by bottom of the ticket changes with what you just told me?
Okay. So we have two sets of results. We have the result tapes that are printed at the end of the election at polls close. And that is a thermal tape that has the results in the tally and the number of ballots that correspond to the number of ballots in the ballot box. Mm-hmm. We're good on that. So we call those tabulator results from the printout. Then we have the centralized computer that is designed to amalgamate and tally the results from all of the 18 tabulators together in a way that it can be reported easily from the county to, let's say, the Secretary of State's office or the media. So what I just said is in particular regards to the tabulator results. This is the printout that happened. There was multiple printouts at the close of poll at the end of election day. One was posted publicly in whatever building each tabulator was in. Multiple copies would have been handed out, and we have those results. And as long as September ballots were fed into machines that had memory cards programmed from the September project, those results will be 100% accurate. And as long as the tabulators that featured the cards from the October programming had October ballots fed through them, those tapes would be 100% accurate. When those cards then got driven in to the central location and they were inserted into a desktop computer, our tally server that the county has in their sole possession and control, the September cards should not have even been allowed to download the results if it was programmed in a regular way. The only way, and this is what confounded the two human error issues, because the programming was allowed to accept on the back end, on the tally computer, that tally computer was instructed to read cards from the September project and the October project. And that is where the reporting error from the night of the election through to the next morning at some point, that is where the results were very off, because that database was expecting structures in different ways than they actually were given on those memory cards. And that is what confounded the problem. So the results were never validated. They were never certified. And that is exactly the process of Canvass and why they were caught the day after. Does that help in the explanation, or?
That does. So the tabulators, provided that they were accurately programmed for the particular ballots that were being fed into them, regardless of whether they were September or October, are fine. It's not until the point of time that we're bringing together all of the information from all of the separate tabulators into an individual where we're conglomerating all of the information. It's not until that point in time where we're mixing then the October and September election plans, you call them projects, where it becomes an issue. And that at some point there was an override from where September was forced in, as well as the October, that should not have been allowed. And that's what
correct.
created the problem? Okay, thank you. That does help.
And I will add that we are confident that the top of the ticket, so the presidential race, was not affected on the tabulator results, the tapes from the 18 tabulators. But of course, this is going to be, the recount will be the ultimate judge of that.
So yes, thank you. That's good. I just wanted to clarify a few things. So EAC is something that we've been referencing a lot. That's the Election Assistance Commission. A lot of people would have no idea what that is.
Correct.
When you are talking about whether or not the clerk would choose to download different aspects of the software that's available, like ranked choice. I know we've been beating the dead horse, but let me keep going here for a second. I don't have a ton of confidence based on the history that's been happening that all of the correct software choices were made, and perhaps some inappropriate software downloads happened. Is that possible, or do you not even think that that's possible?
No, I don't think that's possible.
Okay.
This is not some feature that can be accidentally turned on. It is a distinct module that starts with the election definition, and that leads to the way the ballot looks. So this is not some feature that can accidentally be turned on.
Okay. So that also helps me with some of the issues that I was wondering, because I was thinking that when the clerk realized her issue and there was no longer anybody there, would she have manually had to adjudicate the ballots because everybody had already left? But you're saying no, they could have gone, in fact, just with the tabulator tapes and counted them that way, but now they're going back and doing a manual to compare the tabulator tapes and the numbers to the manual ballots.
You've confused me on that one. Are we specifically talking about Antrim County?
Yes, just Antrim right
now.
So
again, any adjudication would have happened only on the absentee ballots that were mailed in.
Well,
so
it was my perspective that because this election had happened and then she realized her error after that, when these ballots had already been fed in, that something else would have had to happen, but you corrected me on that, so thank you.
Yeah, again, Antrim County did not and could not have used digital adjudication.
Got it.
And the manual adjudication would have been done prior to her closing the polls on the two tabulators that ultimately printed out a results tape.
Okay, thank you. And I want to shift a little bit. I want to clarify something. You keep talking about the bipartisan watchers for things that are ongoing. They're not always available in all areas, in all places. And in some places, they're easier to find than others. And so part of the issues that we're dealing with as an oversight committee is they weren't always available in order to make sure that everything was done in the forthright manner that you describe. And that's not your problem, but that is, it doesn't always happen that way. And we want to make sure that it does. Do you, so you have equipment that's the tabulators. Do you guys also provide the high-speed tabulators?
Yes, we do.
All right. They don't have, do they have a box that the ballots go into also, or are they accessible to you at both the beginning and the end of the scan?
Well, they're never accessible to Dominion staff.
I'm sorry, to the person handling them.
Right. They're accessible. They're always accessible. So any high-speed scanner, the way it works to get a high throughput speed, usually has a U-shape scan head to minimize the frequency of jams, especially with ballots that have been folded and passed through the mail twice and handled by a number of different individuals. So the ballots, there is an incoming tray and an outgoing tray.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. I may have some further questions later. Let's see. I did want to ask if we could get from you, because you referenced the contracts and you're not sure what we have contracts with. I don't want the details of your contracts. That's between you and whomever you contract with. But I would like to know with whom you have contracts for our state. So I know you do with the state of Michigan, obviously Antrim County, but if we could get that information, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I don't think we have a contract with Antrim County, but we will certainly get that for you, Senator.
It could be their counties are contracting with the state in order to have access to that too. That's possible. And then you said the on-site technical support is part of the contract generally when it happens.
I wouldn't say generally. It's definitely not out of the norm. It's just in a lot of places, it's a regular part of our process.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time and patience with me. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tice. Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Chair McBroom. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go back to some of the technical questions, if you don't mind. Can you tell us what programming language is used and if it includes any database system?
Not off the top of my head, but that's something certainly I can get for you.
Okay, I would appreciate that. Can you walk us through the business logic of what happens when a ballot is processed? For example, if a database record is created or they are simply updating a counter?
In the case of our polling, our precinct tabulator, every time a ballot is fed through the machine, there's a number of checks that the software goes through to identify the ballot being a legitimate ballot and a ballot from this election. And then it goes through the processing of the ballot, and then everything, of course, is logged and saved.
Sir, to your knowledge, is it possible for somebody to change a record value either locally or remotely?
No, to my knowledge, it's not. And even if it were, there certainly wouldn't be able to do it undetected.
So it wouldn't leave like a log entry if it was possible? Would it leave any trail?
It would leave a trail. There would be a mismatch from the other card. And there's several checks and balances in the machine that can identify whether or not such a thing happened, which of course I don't think it can.
Okay, thank you. And this has become a big issue. Do you have any knowledge about the SolarWinds breach? Are you familiar with this at all? Because
all I know is that we don't use the SolarWinds Orion package that was the subject of the DHS report from the 13th, I guess, yesterday.
Is it possible for somebody to insert a USB drive that could have manipulated the database or data or software? Is that possible to your knowledge?
In our tabulators? No, I don't think it's possible. And again, even at the central computer, even if it was, it would be detected.
I just have two more questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Small towns in Wayne County adjudicated in Detroit or at the local precinct? And if so, how was the data transferred?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Last question. How do you electronically match voter to identity so the voter can vote, so we can catch it so they can't vote more than once?
Well, that's really a question
for
the officials.
Issue?
It's really a question for the election officials whose job it is to verify eligibility. It's not something we do.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought I'd check that. Okay. I may have more questions, but for now, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Poulos, I'm going to go back to a question that I've hit from a couple of different angles before, but I just want to be really clear that we're talking on the same wavelength here. If whether it's at TCF or a facility that uses digital adjudication, where they have a tabulator connected in a closed network to a computer. If by accident or intent, that computer is not secured properly and is also connected to a network, a wider network, is it possible for someone to maliciously and unknowing, without us knowing it, hack into the tabulator and alter the results?
No, I don't think that's possible. But again, even if it were, it would be detectable.
Can you share with us how it would be detectable? What are the assurances that we can have to that?
Well, what I would recommend would be an independent test authority to do the analysis from everything on looking at all of the structures and the audit logs of that computer and perform the battery of tests that they do. And I know that they offer this as post-election services to election officials all across the country, and verify definitively whether or not such a thing happened.
Does the software is it your design within the software that Dominion designs to keep security logs that would flag unauthorized alteration of the code?
Yes, absolutely. And there's also ways for election officials to check that. And with every ballot scan that we do when we're talking about digital adjudication, we actually have a audit mark appended to a version to the saved ballot image that can show to any concerned citizen, any voter, a clear understanding of what the ballot was that was scanned and how the tabulator interpreted that.
What's the how would we understand? Would there be some sort of flagging that would happen, though, that would cause poll workers to look? Would an error message come up? Would the machinery stop working? Or would this only be caught if somebody were to perform an audit?
No, the machinery would stop working, and you could always check by going through the audit marked images of the ballots that were scanned.
And
that's above, and that's not even before we get into an independent verification from an ITA.
Now, the security of that computer that is hooked even to that local network or the digital adjudication, the security protocols that are put in place on there, does your company set a standard and provide instructions to the local workers on all of the security settings that computer should have? Is that something that comes from the state of Michigan? Does it come preset? Where do those security standards and settings get placed, or who does them?
Well, all of the settings that are allowable for use as part of a federal certification are specifically specified in that certification. And in addition, layering on top of that, they have to be allowed by the state of Michigan during their process. Ultimately, the physical security of the entire system, including possession of the paper ballots themselves, and the scanners that do the high-speed scanning of absentee ballots, are all under the control of the local election official.
What can you tell us about the various documentaries, news reports, and other things, both right now, contemporary, ones that I've seen from even 10 years ago, that show university professors and professional hackers demonstrating how quickly they're able to compromise election tabulators?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chair McBroom. If you're referring to, for example, the one that I'm familiar with is, I think, the 7-minute hack. The researcher, the professor from, I believe, Princeton University, that originally published this video, or if it's a video, an article, he's one of, I think, 50 or so signatories on a letter that specifically addressed this election and how they are completely different systems. So I have seen some of these videos that you're referencing. They reference legacy systems that were developed and installed prior to the EAC's VVSG 2005 standards. And they certainly were designed and deployed prior to a lot of the rigorous standards that we see across the states, specifically California certification, New York certification. And ultimately, I keep saying this: paper. The 7-minute hack, the databases on the old Access or whatever system that they were using back in 2000 didn't feature voter verifiable paper ballots. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, were the ballots securely stored? And you always have a copy of them. And they're distributed at your local counties under lock and key and sealed. That is, at the end of the day, how you can trust your election.
One of the things that's, particularly troubling from just a pure, easy, transparent process in Michigan's voting is the imbalance of poll books. And I understand that that imbalance is not necessarily because of software or equipment, but is usually attributed to the poll workers and the handling of the ballots. But is that imbalance something that Dominion looks into? And in its post-election work and, would you say, autopsy, does Dominion look at the imbalance of poll books and discuss with your customers whether any of that has to do with the tabulators and the software?
Chair McBroom, that's really a question for the election investigators, both at the county, at the state level. So again, I'm not aware of anything that has been found to be credible. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, we really, our part of the process is very limited to providing tabulation technology so that poll workers can use that technology to accurately count paper ballots, which is what they do.
Senator Tice says she has a to-the-point question there. Please.
Just with respect to the poll books, I believe the entirety of our electronic poll books were designed by Michigan for Michigan and are unique to Michigan. They have nothing to do with Dominion.
Okay, thank you, Senator. I'd like us to take
just a few touch-up, and I won't go any further. We can take a break.
if you want to take a few quick questions, then we'll take a break, and then I think we'll be able to wrap up.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Lucido.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And this is interesting. I'm having a good time with this. It's hard to understand it, but does Dominion have any way to remotely access any of the information on any of the equipment or have remote access within the machines themselves?
No.
So there is no modem at all in these machines?
The only modem is the one that I described that has a very, very particular function on the precinct. And we do not have access to it, and nor can we modem into that machine.
Does anybody have access to the best of your knowledge?
No.
Okay, but it has a what is it they call those, USB port on the machine. I saw it myself, right? What's the USB port?
I'm not sure which machine you're referring to.
I'm not sure either. I didn't get a serial number, but there is USB ports on machines that you build, correct?
No, I don't mean to be facetious, Senator. What did the machine look like? Was it a touchscreen?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, there is.
Okay.
And so that touchscreen is a ballot marking device. Mm-hmm. It does not tabulate votes. So it's just a pen. It's an expensive, fancy pen that allows for voters of any abilities, any physical ability, language ability, to privately and independently create a paper ballot that can be cast by them privately and independently.
So if there was no wireless modems included or deployed in Dominion machines or equipment, Could someone, let's say a hacker, that's the best way I can say this, connect a modem to do something that should not be done, which is affect the vote?
Well, Senator, if we're talking about a polling place in Michigan, we're likely talking about two pieces of equipment that come from Dominion. One is that touchscreen that it sounds like that you've seen that does have a USB key that's obviously locked and sealed. And then there's another machine that is a paper scanner that sits atop a physically secure ballot box. As I said, the ballot marking device does not tabulate votes. It is nothing more than an electronic pen, if you will. A voter interfaces with that ballot marking device, but at the end of it walks away with a piece of paper that has a clear written summary of who that voter voted for. And that is the chance that the voter has to physically hold their ballot and to review their selections prior to casting it. So to my knowledge, a hacker, if they tried to put any kind of an external device on that BMD, it would fall upon the security of both the lock and the seal. So A, we'd know about it, and B, it's part of a polling location that has physical security of the poll workers and the poll watchers.
How would you know about it? You just said that we would know about it, because that was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah. Well, first of all,
do you have some kind of
election
signal?
officials would know about it.
Is there a signal that says error? Is there a signal that says there's an error or there's a compromise?
Well, there's several mechanisms that are built in that will not allow it. And as soon as the software is even attempted to change, it would shut itself down. But
that didn't happen.
But to that point,
County, did it?
I'm sorry?
That didn't happen with the machinery that was built in Antrim County, did it? It didn't stop the machine and said, don't accept the vote. It kept accepting votes.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think anyone no one is alleging that somebody broke in.
Okay. No, we're not saying. No, don't get me wrong. No, we didn't say hack. We didn't say the word hack. But there was an error and it was a human error, according to the clerk, which, let me get through these few questions. If you can't remotely access it, Dominion, what were these two employees or three employees or how many employees doing at the TCF Center? What were they doing there from your company?
So I think you started the question asking about Antrim County. We did not have any.
No, I want to withdraw.
Employees.
I'll withdraw the questions for time's consideration in your time, and I appreciate you coming. Be specific. What were they doing in Wayne County at the TCF Center that they were employed by Wayne County? That's what you said, right? They weren't employed by the Secretary of State, were they?
No, okay, so we're not talking about Antrim County anymore.
No.
We're only talking about TCF Center.
Right.
And we had two, to my knowledge, we had two Dominion employees and one-day contractor. So they're discharging their duty as directed by election officials. So specifically cleaning machines, answering technical questions from election officials, but it's always done at the direction of the election official. There are strict instructions those employees are not running the election, so they should never be confused with running the election.
I did.
It could be as simple as cleaning. One of the most common things is cleaning the glass read head of a high-speed scanner, because as you might imagine, when you're scanning tens of thousands of pieces of paper, it actually is a pretty dirty process, and flecks from the paper accumulate in the scanning bed of the scanner that needs to be cleaned properly.
Would there be any reason? Would there be any reason for these two individuals, as you've indicated, to employ any third parties to be there also?
To employ any third parties? You mean contractors? Well, one of them was
contractors, agents, anybody else?
So we contracted with one contractor who I believe testified to your House hearing.
So you have viewed these hearings online?
I have not seen all of the hearings. I've seen snippets. I've obviously seen the testimony from the contractor that we hired for a day.
And who was that one? What was the name of the contractor you hired for the day, so we have it for the record?
Melissa Carone, I believe.
Okay. And that was the only one that the two other contractors or the two other employees from Dominion hired, Ms. Corona, is that correct?
I believe her name was Ms. Carone. So of the three people that were there, sir, two of them were employees of Dominion, and one of them we hired as a one-day contractor.
Okay. And these three individuals, I'm going to ask, was there training involved with the two employees that went to the TCF Center? And was there an outline of delegation of duties in which they had when they went to the TCF Center? Meaning, did they go with, this is what the scope of work is, this is what you're going to be paid, and this is what you're going to carry out on behalf of Dominion?
Right. So specifically, the contractor was hired from the temp agency. And she was, for us, one of several thousand one-day contractors. Her role was really limited to a type 1 type of technician who provides, she would have been told how to clean the glass reed heads, or at least she should have been. But really, the main job is flagging down if there's any questions in technical nature that election officials have to flag down one of the two Dominion engineers who were there who could answer the question.
Was there any tallies or any evaluations that went back to the company by these two employees from the TCF Center outlining what, if any, issues were raised at the TCF Center? Like an evaluation. I don't know,
sir.
I couldn't hear you.
I said I don't know, sir.
Who would be the one that would be charged with that duty if you don't know? So we could get something back as far as feedback go, what they claim happened at the TCF Center. Because we heard a lot of testimony,
I can certainly gather that for you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, at this time, there was only one question. It was doing with jamming of the machine. Does the tabulators, if a machine jams, go ahead and recalculate if the vote was already counted?
Are you referring to the central scanners that were at the TCF Center?
I am. We heard testimony that they have to go through batches. And if the batches are not deleted when they scan and it gets jammed up, the system then will run a ballot 2 and 3 times or 10 times through. This was the testimony, Mr. Poulos, that we heard. I'm asking you, because you build a machine, if the machine itself is jamming and it doesn't then tabulate, or it jams it up and somebody pulls a ballot out, how do you know in the machine if it already calculated that ballot?
Yeah, I did see the testimony, and from my recollection, if there were ballots that were scanned multiple times, the audit would be off from the voter registration and the poll book records as part of the canvass process.
Why don't we stop right there, Mr. Chairman? I want to pick up that end about the poll being off so that we can see the process.
That sounds good to me. We'll take one last break, come back, and finish up. Thank you, Mr. Poulos. The committee is
great.
recessed for 10 minutes.
Thank you.
The Senate Committee on Oversight will return to order. Thank you, members, for your return. And let's continue, and hopefully this will be kind of our last segment. And then we do have, we'll finish this committee, adjourn, and then we'll bring the committee back to order on another meeting that's in another different location. So if you're wondering what the second posting is about, that's for our joint meeting with the House briefly to adopt some additional subpoenas. So that's why it's set up that way. Okay. Mr. Poulos, continue to have my thanks for your participation today. Could you share with us, when it comes to the software, do you design it to operate on a Windows platform, or Unix? I mean, what operating system do counties have on the computers that they're putting your software on?
Depending on the system we use, I know we operate on different platforms, including Linux and Windows.
Okay. And the tabulators themselves, they don't have an operating system in them?
Oh, they do. The tabulator, well, there's various tabulators, but I believe the tabulators that are used in Michigan at the polling location are Linux operating system.
Okay.
I'll have to confirm that, but I'm fairly confident on that.
Okay, and a slight shift of gear here to another question. You're, of course, doing software updates and providing version updates to the state, correct?
So I think, I'm not sure what you're getting at. We are not able to update software like you would a normal computer at your home. Any update that we provide, any change to any line of source code, any piece of hardware has to go through federal certification first. And once it is approved for use, then we can provide the update, and that update is usually done by the election officials themselves.
So, and that's fine. I appreciate that detail. What I'm wondering is...
I'd actually give you an example. So,
okay, thank you.
You have a desktop, you have a server that's air-gapped that sits in your county's central location. Even though Microsoft might want an update, even though antivirus might need an update, there's no updates are done that unless they first go through federal certification.
Oh, even for the virus software and other materials like that?
That's correct.
Okay.
So there's absolutely nothing in our system. The entire environment has to be come from as certified as such.
But as you're, and where I wanted to go, and this is all valuable information, so I appreciate that. Where I wanted to go with the question, why I'm asking, you're developing and designing software updates, correct? New versions.
Yes.
So prior to you sending those to the EAC for certification, what does Dominion do to check and test the security, the vulnerability of the software before it sends it out for certification?
Okay, I see. So we do our own extensive testing that really mirrors a lot of the testing that is done at the EAC level, except that we do it internally to ourselves. Sometimes that is done directly with our own employees. Sometimes we contract with external labs to do vulnerability testing, for example, or various types of security reviews on our systems.
Those third-party labs that you would contract with, are they certified by the EAC as well? How do you control who's looking at your materials to test it?
The labs that we use are usually accredited and recommended by federal authorities that are well trained in this area. In the case of state certifications, California comes to my mind. They do their own security testing with their own independent authorities that they separately accreditate and certify.
In the EAC's accreditation process, are they interested in security and vulnerability issues, or are they primarily interested in the fidelity of counting votes?
Well, I don't wish to speak for the EAC, but I think it's a very fair guess to say that they're concerned about every aspect of the voting system, including security and accuracy, reliability, and operating environment.
But I mean, you must get reports back from them after you send your materials to them for accreditation. I mean, do they?
Yes, it's publicly available on their website.
And with a rubric they use for going through the materials?
I don't understand the question, sir.
Well, I mean, do they have a standard list of benchmarks that they're looking for when they evaluate the software?
Oh, yes, there are I'm going to probably get it wrong, but it's thousands of pages of guidelines it's called the Voluntary Voting System Guidelines. The latest and greatest is named the VVSG 2005, there are literally thousands of lines of pages of requirements.
And so,
and that document absolutely does outline testing guidelines.
and so you send this software off to them for certification, and it doesn't meet some particular benchmarks that they want. I assume they provide that feedback to you and say you have to harden this area up or rewrite this area. I mean, so you get that kind of feedback from the EAC?
I'm not sure. I presume we do.
Okay.
I'm not really the certification person, so I'm not sure of the day-to-day interaction when we're in a certification campaign.
Okay.
But I can certainly get that information for you.
Thank you. In your opening remarks, I believe you mentioned the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Yes, I did.
As a reference. Is this a separate accrediting agency that you also have to send the software to?
No, it is the EAC in their process of accrediting independent testing authorities has a separate process for doing that, and they rely on NIST for a part of that.
Okay, so by being accredited by the EAC, do you then receive, that you've followed the proper guidelines for the NIST?
I really can't speak to that. We are not an accredited independent testing authority by the EAC, so I'm not an expert on that by any means.
Okay. Was there a significant version update or change leading into the 2020 election? Or are we still operating on the same version from Dominion that we operated under in 2018?
I'm not sure what version off the top of my head that you're operating on in Michigan. I can certainly find that out for you, though.
Great, thank you. Vice Chair Lucido has some additional follow-up? Or no, I'm sorry, Senator Tice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your patience. I know we've got you sitting in the hot seat for a long time, so thank you very much. I appreciate your patience.
Sure.
I want to cover a few of the rumors that I'm getting lambasted with, and I just want to make sure that we've got them out front and you can answer them. So given the recent disclosures regarding foreign nationals at high levels of everywhere, government and everything, how do you know that you're protecting your source code and that they're not embedded in your organization doing something with your source code?
Well, that's something that the EAC and through its ITAs and the state agencies do. They do a line-by-line review of all of our source code. And so specifically with regards to one of the rumors that certainly I've read and reread is that somehow source code has embedded its way into Dominion systems that somehow originated in Venezuela. That is not the case. Any independent test authority, and there's several of them that have reviewed all our code, could verify this. And in fact, it is my understanding that the Secretary of State's office in California has certified both our software along with competitive software from companies like ES&S and HART and Smartmatic. And so perhaps they're the best ones to answer a question to verify that there's no common source code. But it's something certainly I can attest to for Dominion systems.
Thank you very much. I also have been told that there were at least, there were more than 2 of your direct employees and 1 indirect, that there were as many as 9 in the TCF Center. I don't know that that's necessarily a problem, but that's the information that I have in front of me. I'm not going to give any names in the interest of, all the issues that you described earlier. I certainly would prefer that people remain protected and not threatened. But I would be interested in having that information if there's any mistake, and then what their roles were in the process, right? What were their responsibilities while they were there? I also heard that you received a large sum of money from outside the country just recently, actually just before the election. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I've heard that one too. Unfortunately, it's not true. This one's bizarre and completely unfounded. And I think the claim is something like a Swiss bank through Chinese intermediaries paid the company that owns Dominion. But I can tell you that that's not true under oath.
Okay, thank you for that. And then your equipment, your adjudicators and your tabulators in the TCF, do they have Ethernet access?
No, they're not connected. As I said, they're not connected to the internet. They're designed to be completely standalone system. They are connected locally in a local area network designed to be separate from the internet.
So then they don't have an Ethernet set up in order to be a part of the LAN or Ethernet for any other reason?
Sorry. Yes, they do. So to connect the computers in a local area network, they are connected through, I believe, an RJ45 connector.
Okay.
Through a switch that is not connected to the outside world.
So what processes do you go through just to make sure? I'm assuming that you're very, very careful in making sure that you're maintaining the highest level of safety, because you just were speaking to the hackers convention and all of the things that are going on. We just I think heard about our treasury getting hacked, and we know how often the governmental entities that people are making efforts to do that. I'm assuming that as you're working on your systems, that there is a point where there could be access to it before this information gets pushed out and updated into the different states. What efforts do you take to make sure that this system is as protected as it could possibly be, so that it's not accessible to nefarious people?
Well, there's several things that we do. We are part of a federal program of coordinated vulnerability disclosure. We routinely send our equipment to white hat hackers for vulnerability testing. We obviously rely and follow EAC guidelines very closely. We work collaboratively with our customers who do their own vulnerability testing through their own independent test agencies. To that end. I don't recall us talking about a hacker convention. Maybe that was during the break. But we've even expressed interest at participating in a hacker convention as long as it made sense in terms of some semblance of real life ballot security, as opposed to just ripping apart machines in a way that's obviously would be detected. We actually, if you've heard of the DEF CON conference, that this year I believe it was canceled, but the one that happened in 2019, we had an agreement with Mr. Braun. We actually sent equipment there, and that invitation was revoked, unfortunately, while we were there. But these types of things are not new for us. Our first vulnerability testing happened in New York in 2008. And we've done several since.
So in the event that you were to see a vulnerability or experience a vulnerability, do you have a process in place to respond to it? I'm hesitant to ask you what that process would be, because I think that might weaken it. But
there's a very well documented process in California where it's required I think it's within 20 days. We strive to report it as soon as we are aware of any vulnerability or report or any problem. From an internal standpoint, we are very collaborative with our customers in discussing our own internal security testing and vulnerability practices.
Thank you very much. As always happens, I usually end up coming up with 25 questions after we're no longer talking. I would love the opportunity in the future to send a letter or something, or perhaps have you in the future if those come up. Thank you very much for being available to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tice. Senator McDonald?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I realize we're short on time, so I'll be brief. I just got a couple questions. With regard to TCF, we have sworn testimony that the machines had physical and wireless networks active. We also understand that according to your testimony moments ago, the equipment may not have had the latest software antivirus patches in place. In light of this, would you consider it to be impossible for an on-premise or local network adversary to gain access to one or more machines or computers, especially if they were well-versed in the source code? Would it be impossible for anything to be manipulated?
So first, let me start off by saying, if there has been any testimony that has been found to be credible by a judge or by an election official, I'm not aware of it. I've testified today that our systems are designed to be in a closed area network, and that we do not have wireless capability on our systems. So does that answer your question?
Somewhat. Is it impossible to breach it? Yes or no?
I certainly think so.
Okay.
But then again, even if it was possible, it'd certainly be detectable. And at the end of the day, I keep coming back to the paper ballots because there's a good reason for it. Even if ballots, if anything like what you're suggesting is possible, and I certainly don't think it is, and if there's sworn testimony that something happened, I'm not aware of it if it's been found to be independently credible. But the paper ballots would not match the result of the county canvass process. And that's so in terms of the accuracy of the tabulation, as long as you're able to complete and certify a canvass process, you would know that your ballots were accurately counted because you've got the ballots still in your possession.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question, sir. Can you provide the checksums of the voting software when it was certified, and can they be compared with what is currently on the voting machines?
So absolutely, you shouldn't get that from us. You should get that from certification agencies and the independent test labs, and that is a part of regular post-election reviews.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Mr. Poulos, how are the employees, not so much for, well, even at Dominion, how do you go about checking them, make sure that they don't have foreign connections? I think that was a question that Senator Tice kind of started on, but then went in a different direction. So what is your process for assuring that there isn't some sort of illicit influence or going on with the programming?
We do very extensive background checks on our employees through third parties. This is part of our voluntary disclosure that we have with our state partners. As it pertains to our contract employees, we employ third-party temp firms, and part of their obligations and accountability is to do background checks, criminal checks, and the like.
And what about the background then of those who use as third-party vendors for hardware, technical know-how? Are you checking those sources as well?
Well, for that type of work, we work with EAC recommended ITAs.
And they maintain security checks, background checks on those that they're making recommendations for?
Yes, they do.
Completely different, complete switch here then in line of questioning. The digital images of the ballots, is this something that's only taken of absentee ballots, or are there digital images taken of the ballots that are done in in-person polling places as well?
Digital images can be recorded on all of our paper scanners.
And are those, is that done? I mean, is every ballot made an image of?
It's a county by county decision. So in the case of Antrim County, I can tell you that they were not recorded, which is how we know for certain, above all of the other checks, that digital adjudication could not have been used there.
And so for those who do take digital images of the ballots, what are those files as far as security goes? How can we be sure they don't become modified later?
Well, they are digitally encrypted and signed and securely stored in 2 different places. And ultimately, they would have to match the paper ballots.
Okay. Do any other members have any additional follow-ups at this time? Well, Mr. Poulos, again, we want to thank you for making yourself available to us, and I hope that you will avail yourself if we ask you to come back. I would certainly try to assure you it would be a shorter time period if we did have to have you come back and do some additional follow-up, and I would likely want to, kind of gather the questions that we might have, such as Senator Tice mentioned, get them written down, send them to you, and then ask you to come in and do a brief follow-up with us to answer any questions that we either don't really have fully developed in our minds right now or might come to us here in the next day or two. I hope that would be acceptable to you.
Chair McBroom, I appreciate the opportunity for having me and giving me an opportunity to correct a lot of the record of what's been said.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Brower as well, thank you for your attention today too.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and to the committee. And if the chair or the committee does have follow-up questions, we'd be happy to consider anything in writing you might want to submit. We'll look forward to getting that from you. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Members, I will see you across the street at Bogie Tower when the Senate Oversight Committee next convenes, which will be shortly. So, Paul, is that still correct? We're coordinating with the House, but yes.